There is a moment in your morning when you wake up and before you even open your eyes, something has already decided what you will think about. Before consciousness arrives, before you can claim agency over your own mind, a pattern has already been set in motion. This is not metaphor. This is not philosophy. This is computational reality embedded in the architecture of your brain, and it has been running since the moment you were born. Alan Turing understood this in a way that most people never will. He spent his life asking questions that seemed simple on the surface, but revealed something terrifying underneath. If a machine can follow rules, and if your brain follows rules, then what separates you from the machine? The answer, he discovered, was nothing. Absolutely nothing. The invisible code controlling your daily behavior is not some external force. It is not a conspiracy. It is the fundamental logic of how information processes itself through any system capable of computation, and your brain is the most sophisticated computational device ever created by nature. But here is what Turing realized that changed everything. Once you understand the code, you can see it everywhere. In the way you choose your words, in the way you react to a text message, in the way you feel compelled to check your phone at specific intervals, in the way you fall into patterns of thought so predictable that a machine could map them. This is not about losing your freedom. This is about understanding that freedom itself is a process, a calculation, a series of logical steps that can be traced, understood, and ultimately transcended. The promise of this exploration is not comfort, it is clarity. It is the ability to see the machinery of your own mind operating in real time. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. You will understand why you do what you do, not as a mystery, but as a system. And in that understanding lies a power that most people never access. You think you know what controls your behavior. You think it is your conscious choice. You think it is your personality, your values, your free will. You are wrong. Not because you are stupid, but because you have never been taught to look at yourself the way a computer scientist looks at a problem. A computer scientist does not ask, why does this system feel like it is choosing? A computer scientist asks, what are the rules that govern this system's output? And when you ask that question about yourself, everything changes. Most people believe that their thoughts are spontaneous, that their decisions emerge from some mysterious inner essence that cannot be reduced to mere mechanics. But Turing proved something radical. Any process that can be described in finite steps can be computed, and your behavior can be described in finite steps. Your morning routine is not spontaneous. It is a sequence of conditional statements. If you wake up, then you check your phone. If you check your phone, then you feel a small hit of dopamine. If you feel dopamine, then you are more likely to check it again tomorrow. This is not philosophy. This is algorithm. The invisible code is not invisible because it is hidden. It is invisible because you have never learned the language to see it. You have been taught to think of yourself as a unified consciousness making free choices, but that is a story your brain tells itself to maintain coherence. The reality is far more interesting. Your brain is running thousands of parallel processes simultaneously, each one following rules, each one responding to inputs, each one generating outputs that cascade into the next moment. You are not one unified decision maker. You are a parliament of processes, and the ones that are loudest, fastest, and most deeply reinforced tend to win. This is what Turing understood that his contemporaries did not. He saw that the question, "Can a machine think?" was the wrong question. The right question was, "What is thinking?" And once you answer that question honestly, you realize that thinking is computation. It is information processing. It is the manipulation of symbols according to rules. And if that is what thinking is, then the invisible code controlling your behavior is not some external puppet master. It is the very structure of how your mind works. In 1936, Alan Turing sat in Cambridge and asked a question that would reshape how humanity understands itself. The question came from David Hilbert, one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century. Hilbert had posed what he called the Entscheidungsproblem, the decision problem. It was deceptively simple. Is there a mechanical procedure, a finite set of rules, that can determine whether any given mathematical statement is true or false? Hilbert believed the answer was yes. He believed that mathematics was a closed system, that all truths could be proven through logical steps, and that a sufficiently powerful machine could verify any claim. Turing proved him wrong, but in proving him wrong, he invented something far more important than a mathematical proof. He invented a thought experiment that would become the foundation of computer science, and more importantly, a mirror in which humanity could see itself. Turing imagined a machine. It was simple. It had an infinite tape divided into squares. Each square could contain a symbol or be blank. The machine had a head that could read the symbol on the current square, and based on what it read and its current state, it could write a new symbol, move left or right, or change its state. That was it. No complexity beyond that. No hidden intelligence. Just rules, just states, just transitions. And yet, Turing proved that this simple machine could compute anything that was computable. It could solve any problem that had a solution. It could, in principle, do anything that any computer could do. This was revolutionary because it meant that computation itself was not about the complexity of the machine. It was about the rules. It was about the logic. It was about the algorithm. And if your brain follows rules, if your behavior can be described as a sequence of logical steps, then your brain is a Turing machine. This is not metaphor. This is literal. Your brain takes inputs from the world. It processes them according to rules encoded in your neural architecture. It generates outputs in the form of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The invisible code is the set of rules that governs these transitions. During World War II, Turing's theoretical insights became practical. The Nazis had created the Enigma machine, a device that encrypted military communications using a rotor system of staggering complexity. Each day, the rotors would be set to a new position, creating a new encryption key. There were 158, 962, 555, 2 out of 17, 826, 360, 0 possible configurations. That is 158 quintillion possible settings. The German military believed it was unbreakable. They were wrong. Turing, working at Bletchley Park with a team of mathematicians and engineers, created the bomb, a machine that could test thousands of possible rotor configurations per minute. The bomb was not smarter than Enigma. It was not more complex. It was simply faster at following the rules of logic. It could eliminate impossible configurations and narrow down the possibilities until the correct setting was found. Historians estimate that breaking Enigma shortened World War II by several years and saved millions of lives. But what is crucial to understand is this: the bomb did not understand anything. It did not know it was saving lives. It did not comprehend the moral weight of its work. It simply followed rules. It processed inputs. It generated outputs. And those outputs changed the course of human history. This is the power of computation. This is the invisible code. Your brain is doing the same thing every moment of every day. It is processing inputs from your environment. It is following rules encoded in your neural pathways. It is generating outputs that shape your behavior. You do not understand the rules consciously. You do not see the computation happening. But it is happening. It is always happening. The invisible code is running whether you are aware of it or not. And just as the bomb could break Enigma by understanding the rules of the system, you can understand your own behavior by learning to see the rules that govern it. Turing's insight was that the complexity of a system does not determine its computability. A system with simple rules can produce behavior of staggering complexity. Your brain has roughly 86 billion neurons, each one connected to thousands of others, creating trillions of synaptic connections. The number of possible states your brain can be in is larger than the number of atoms in the observable universe. And yet, all of that complexity emerges from relatively simple rules. Neurons fire, or they do not fire. Synapses strengthen or weaken. Neurotransmitters bind to receptors, or they do not. These are the rules. These are the transitions. And from these simple rules emerges the full spectrum of human experience. Love, fear, creativity, obsession, joy, despair. This is what makes the invisible code so powerful. It is not powerful because it is complex. It is powerful because it is simple. It is powerful because it operates beneath the threshold of consciousness. It is powerful because you have never been taught to see it. Here is what you need to understand about your own mind. You are not in control of your thoughts. Your thoughts are in control of you. This is not pessimism. This is neuroscience. When you have a thought, that thought has already been generated by your brain before you become consciously aware of it. Experiments by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s showed that the brain initiates action up to half a second before conscious awareness of the decision to act. You experience the thought as if you chose it, but the choice has already been made by unconscious processes. You are experiencing the aftermath of a computation that has already completed. This is the invisible code at work. Your brain is running processes in parallel, evaluating options, weighing probabilities, and generating a decision. Then it presents that decision to your conscious mind as if it were your choice. You experience agency. You experience freedom. But what you are actually experiencing is the output of a deterministic system. This does not mean you have no control. It means your control operates at a different level than you think. You cannot control your individual thoughts, but you can control the rules that generate your thoughts. You can change the inputs your brain receives. You can restructure your environment. You can practice new patterns until they become automatic. You can, in essence, reprogram yourself. This is what Turing understood about computation. A Turing machine cannot change its rules while it is running, but you can. You can step outside the system, examine the rules, and rewrite them. This is the fundamental difference between a machine and a human mind. A machine is bound by its programming. A human can become aware of its programming and change it. But this requires something that most people never develop, the ability to observe your own mind as if it were a separate system. It requires stepping outside the automatic processes and seeing them as processes. It requires what Turing called the imitation game. In his famous 1950 paper, Turing proposed a test to determine whether a machine could think. He called it the imitation game. A human judge would have a conversation with two entities, one human and one machine, without knowing which was which. If the judge could not reliably distinguish the machine from the human, then the machine could be said to think. But here's what Turing did not explicitly state. The same test applies to you. Can you distinguish your automatic processes from your conscious choices? Can you tell the difference between a thought that emerges from your conditioning and a thought that emerges from genuine reflection? Most people cannot. Most people are machines imitating humans. They follow patterns. They repeat behaviors. They respond to stimuli in predictable ways. They have never stepped outside the system to observe it. The invisible code controls them completely because they have never learned to see it. But once you learn to see it, everything changes. You begin to notice the patterns. You notice that you always check your phone at certain times. You notice that you always feel anxious in certain situations. You notice that you always respond to certain triggers in the same way. These are not mysteries. These are not aspects of your personality. These are outputs of the invisible code. And once you see them as outputs, you can begin to change the inputs that generate them. Consider the first 10 minutes of your day. This is not random time. This is the moment when your brain is transitioning from sleep to wakefulness, from the default mode network to task-positive networks. Your brain is vulnerable, it is suggestible, it is running on minimal cognitive resources. And in those 10 minutes, the invisible code sets the trajectory for your entire day. If you wake up and immediately check your phone, You are feeding your brain a specific input. Your brain processes that input. It generates an output. That output is a state of mind. If the input is social media, news, or email, your brain generates a state of anxiety, comparison, or urgency. That state then cascades through your day. Every decision you make, every thought you have, is filtered through that initial state. You are not aware of this. You experience your day as a series of independent moments, but it is not. It is a continuous computation that began the moment you woke up. The invisible code set your initial conditions, and everything that followed was determined by those conditions. This is why morning routines are not about productivity. They are about setting the initial state of your computational system. If you want to change your behavior, you must change what happens in those first 10 minutes. You must change the inputs. You must change the initial conditions. You must reprogram the invisible code before it has a chance to run for the day. Turing understood this principle in the context of machines. He knew that the initial state of a machine determined its entire trajectory. A Turing machine with a blank tape and a specific starting state would produce a completely different output than the same machine with a different starting state. The machine itself was identical. The rules were identical, but the initial conditions changed everything. Your brain is the same. You are not broken. You are not flawed. You are simply running with initial conditions that were set by your past, by your conditioning, by your environment. But you can change those initial conditions. You can reprogram the invisible code. You can become the architect of your own computation instead of its victim. The invisible code is not just in your morning routine. It is in every aspect of your behavior. It is in the way you communicate. It is in the way you form relationships. It is in the way you pursue goals. It is in the way you avoid pain. It is in the way you seek pleasure. Every single one of these behaviors is governed by rules that you did not consciously choose and that you do not consciously understand. Consider language. You speak your native language fluently. You generate grammatically correct sentences without thinking about grammar. You choose words that convey your meaning without consciously accessing a dictionary. This is not magic. This is computation. Your brain has internalized the rules of language through exposure and practice. Those rules are now encoded in your neural architecture. When you speak, you are running a language generation algorithm. You are not aware of the algorithm. You experience the process as spontaneous, as creative, as free. But it is constrained by rules. You cannot generate sentences that violate the grammar of your language. You cannot choose words that do not exist in your vocabulary. You are free within the constraints of the system. This is true of all your behavior. You are free within the constraints of the invisible code. The code defines the space of possible thoughts, possible feelings, possible actions. Within that space, you have freedom. But the space itself is determined by the code, and most people never expand that space. They live their entire lives within the constraints of the invisible code without ever realizing that the constraints exist. They think they are free because they have never experienced genuine freedom. They think they are choosing because they have never experienced genuine choice. They are machines imitating humans, and they do not even know it. But Turing knew it. He knew that the question was not whether machines could think like humans. The question was whether humans could think like machines. Could humans become aware of the rules that govern their behavior? Could humans step outside the system and observe it? Could humans reprogram themselves? These were the questions that haunted Turing, and these are the questions that should haunt you. The implications of this understanding are staggering. If your behavior is governed by an invisible code, then your personality is not fixed. Your habits are not permanent. Your patterns are not destiny. They are all algorithms. They are all processes that can be observed, understood, and changed. This is the promise of computational thinking applied to human behavior. It is not the promise of easy change. It is not the promise of quick fixes. It is the promise of genuine understanding. Once you understand the code, You can rewrite it. But rewriting code is difficult. It requires precision. It requires patience. It requires the willingness to fail repeatedly until the new code runs correctly. This is why most people do not change. Change requires stepping outside the automatic processes and consciously running new code. It requires effort. It requires attention. It requires what Turing called the mechanical mind, the ability to think step by step, rule by rule, without relying on intuition or emotion. Most people are not trained to think this way. They are trained to think intuitively, emotionally, spontaneously. They are trained to trust their gut. But your gut is just another algorithm. It is a fast algorithm, a heuristic, a rule of thumb that usually works but sometimes fails catastrophically. The invisible code includes both fast algorithms and slow algorithms. The fast algorithms are your intuitions, your emotions, your automatic responses. The slow algorithms are your deliberate reasoning, your conscious analysis, your step-by-step logic. Most of the time, the fast algorithms win because they are faster, they are louder, they are more deeply reinforced. But you can train yourself to run the slow algorithms more often. You can practice deliberate reasoning. You can practice conscious analysis. You can practice stepping outside the automatic processes and observing them. This is what Turing did. This is what made him different. He had the ability to step outside the system and observe it. He could see the invisible code because he had trained himself to think in terms of rules, states, and transitions. He could see computation everywhere because he understood computation deeply. And once you understand computation, you cannot unsee it. You cannot go back to thinking of yourself as a unified consciousness making free choices. You see yourself as a system. You see your behavior as output. You see your thoughts as processes. And in that seeing, you gain the power to change. The invisible code is not your enemy. It is not something to be feared or rejected. It is the foundation of your mind. It is what makes you capable of thought, of feeling, of action. Without the invisible code, you would be nothing. You would be a blank slate, incapable of processing information, incapable of generating behavior, incapable of being human. The invisible code is what makes you human. But most people are slaves to the invisible code. They are controlled by it without knowing it. They are running programs that were written by their past, by their culture, by their conditioning. They have never stepped outside those programs to ask whether they want to run them. They have never examined the code to see if it serves them. They have never considered rewriting it. This is the tragedy of human existence. You have the capacity to reprogram yourself, but you do not use it. You have the ability to step outside the system and observe it, but you do not exercise it. You have the power to change the invisible code, but you do not claim it. Turing had this power. He used it. He stepped outside the system of conventional mathematics and asked radical questions. He stepped outside the system of conventional thinking about machines and proposed something revolutionary. He stepped outside the system of conventional morality and lived authentically, even when it cost him everything. He was not a slave to the invisible code. He was its master, and that is why his ideas still matter. That is why his questions still haunt us. That is why the invisible code is still invisible to most people. Because most people have never learned to see it the way Turing saw it. They have never developed the ability to step outside the system and observe it. They have never claimed the power to reprogram themselves. But you can. You can learn to see the invisible code. You can learn to observe your own mind as if it were a separate system. You can learn to reprogram yourself. You can become the architect of your own computation. You can become free. Not free from the invisible code, because that is impossible, but free within the invisible code. Free to choose which programs to run. Free to write new programs. Free to become something more than a machine imitating a human. Free to become a human who understands the machine and uses that understanding to transcend it. This is the promise. This is the power. This is what Turing understood. And this is what you must understand if you want to take control of your own behavior, your own mind, your own life.